It's a bit of a different look this week. A special video edition of RSPW Rewind, where we take a trip back in time to the always classy and intelligent discussion among wrestling fans on the internet. Starting this week with some posts from 25 years ago. Way back in time, the mid-90s, right? Vanilla Ice, Beavis and Butthead, Power Rangers. Were Power Rangers a thing in the mid-90s? I thought that was the late 90s. Maybe it was the mid-90s. I don't know. But it was also Survivor Series time in WWF, and we're going to go back to November 24th, 1995 to be exact, with a post titled, Shawn's Collapse, RSPW Thread of the Decade, by Patrick Emmond, or Emond, we'll say Emmond, from Montreal, Canada. He also calls himself the Heartburn Kid. The Heartburn Kid, I guess, is his nickname. That was me in high school. I found Prevacid to be quite helpful. Although it's not the kind of thing you can really stay on long term, otherwise it'll burn the hell out of your esophagus. But it does help. This is what he said. He said, I have never seen this news group as up in arms over one incident as I have this week. This Shawn Michaels incident, real or work, has everyone interested in the WWF. Of course, for those who don't know, what he's referring to is an angle that was shot on Monday Night Raw the night after the Survivor Series in 1995, where Shawn Michaels was wrestling Owen Hart, and he did a kip up, and he was posing, and in the middle of the match, all of a sudden Shawn, he looked like he fainted. He passed down in the middle of the ring, and they sold it like he really did collapse. They credited it to being post-concussion syndrome from the brutal beating he took at the hands of 9, -6, +1, -3 Marines in Syracuse. Up in Syracuse, New York, Club 37, a very famous incident. So they were trying to explain this as post-concussion syndrome. It was all legit. Vince McMahon left the commentary booth, got in the ring, very concerned, checking on him. The referee's yelling at him, calling him Shawn. And he wasn't responding. They put the oxygen mask on him. Of course, on the other channel, on TNT that night on Nitro, we had our first ever singles match on TV between Hulk Hogan and Sting, both of whom were babyfaces at the time. So this was their big way of trying to generate a buzz, steal some thunder away from WCW. So he continues. As along with Diesel's behavior, his shoot interview, the WWF has never been this unpredictable. Oh, how I miss those days. Maybe it was a work, maybe it was legit. Either way, after last weekend, these things are for sure. Number one, the WWF has proven with little previous experience that it can pull off a passable version of hardcore wrestling, collapses, table spots, and work it into the match, unlike WCW's use of Sabu. If the right emphasis is placed on this harder edge, the WWF can reap the benefits of their new reputation. And number two, Vince McMahon is finally getting down and dirty in his competition with Nitro. Great booking and doing stuff on Raw that ensures that fans will want to stay and not flip to TNT. Again, how I miss those days where Vince McMahon was willing to do things that people wanted to see to prevent viewers from fleeing to another channel. Or in today's age, to another streaming service or video game or whatever it is people do when they don't watch Monday Night Raw. Watch paint dry, clip their nails, whatever it may be. It says, and he does not have to resort to Bischoffian tactics to do it. That is giving the Shawn Sid results away on a live Nitro. And number three, everyone will be watching Superstars this weekend and Raw just to get more of a hint as to what the hell happened. To see if they can spot clues as to whether or not this was a work. This could be the highest Raw ever. Coming up next week, just because we'll all be watching, and anyone who has heard about this incident, like the occasional Raw watchers, will tune in. Anyway, this is going to go over like gangbusters for the WWF. Survivor Series and last week's Raw were the shot in the arm that should win them a lot of fans for the time being. And Shawn, I hope that you recover from your real injury soon. and that you return to the ring at 110% to take over the mantle of Wrestler of the 90s. You sound like Vince McMahon now. Vince McMahon, when he would put over Shawn Michaels on commentary, on the one hand, he's the promoter, and nobody can put his top act over better than the promoter, right? He was very good at that. But there was a little something extra in Vince's voice. He had this just great affinity for Shawn Michaels. I don't know if it was like a proud father or something else, but he always had that little extra pep in his step and that little crack in his voice when he would talk about Shawn. Michael Tyler was not much a fan of the angle, or Vince McMahon, it seems, based on his post. As I think the angle was played perfectly, but it was even too tasteless for my standards. Vince, you forgot about the boy who cried wolf. Just think, what if Michaels actually had a blood clot in his brain and collapsed during the match? The wrestlers think it's part of the angle. Michaels is then told he will never be able to wrestle again, or even worse, he's dead. And then the WWF becomes the Loyola Marymount of wrestling. Isn't that a college or a university or something? I don't get the reference. Think of all the bad things that could have happened because of this angle. I understand Vince is trying to make wrestling more realistic, which I give him credit for, but this was ridiculous. With the shape that Michaels has been in from those bastards that jumped him, he had no business being in the ring. Oh yeah, by the way, Vince, your angle sucked. Even worse, because you had Michaels go to Richmond Memorial, which is a good ways from the Coliseum. Makes it look very unrealistic considering the fact that the Medical College of Virginia is only 6 blocks away from the Coliseum. Oh well, World War III is on tonight, and I wonder what kind of BS Bischoff and that HH guy will be pulling tonight. Well, number one, I don't think most people watching Monday Night Raw who are not from that area are going to give a shit how many blocks away the local medical facility was. Even I would say that's nitpicking a little much. But I do love how people bought into the story that Shawn Michaels actually did get jumped by 9 Marines. Not 1, not 2, not even 3, 9 Marines. He was beaten so badly. Remember, he had to give up the Intercontinental Championship, couldn't defend it against Dean Douglas. Had to hand the belt over. 9 Marines. I guess 9 makes for a better story than probably the one who beat him up. December 15, 1997. Post by Rip Claw titled, Hogan Denied by Turner. Wade Keller says that Turner has passed on making Hogan's series Assault on Devil's Island because Hogan reportedly wanted a bigger budget for the show. I'd forgotten about that show. I knew about Thunder in Paradise. I'd forgotten about that Assault on Devil's Island. They said no and just passed on the whole thing. Now it could be picked up by another cable network, maybe USA Network, since it's made for that 18 to 49 male demo. Ho ho ho! We got 18 to 49 demo talk back in 1995. People aren't gonna like that. Even though they ignore the fact that people have been talking about the demo for 25 years, not just because AEW is a thing, but don't let that get in the way of a good narrative. Would be damn funny to see Raw announcers having to promote the show. Maybe this is why Hogan is putting up a fit, supposedly about jobbing to Sting. He would have nothing else to do. Darren says, finally someone can see that this has been, let me rephrase. Says, finally someone can see that this has been cannot act. Assault on Devil's Island sure did look a lot like Thunder in Paradise without the boat. How original. But considering the source, nothing original comes out of Atlanta. December 23rd, 1997, Pete, with a question for Jewish members of RSPW regarding DDP and Dean Malenko. This should be good. I noticed somebody was perturbed by DDP talking about Christmas as his holiday, even though he is Jewish. Not sure that's true. Well, it got me thinking. I noticed the WCW is trying to build up the Guerrero, Malenko, and Mongo Goldberg matches by having Eddie and Mongo on Nitro. I thought it was very strange their opponents, Malenko and Goldberg, were not there. Does their absence have anything to do with Hanukkah? I know it starts around now, but I don't know the exact dates. I can see DDP being there, since with all the tattoos, I guess he's not very devout. I once read something about not being allowed to be buried in Jewish cemeteries because of tattoos. Must be a serious violation of religious law. It is. Also, I was reading David Lee Roth's autobiography, and he says that in concert, he used to have a huge Christmas tree with the Star of David on the top of the tree. So I guess that's why DDP was doing the Christmas thing, kind of for the fans. Jeff Amdur says, I'm still not convinced DDP is a fellow member of the tribe. Now, for the record, I don't believe DDP is Jewish, so I'm not sure where this person got that from. DDP's grandmother was Jewish. He talked about that a long time ago. He's got a Jewish or had a Jewish grandmother. And actually, he didn't find out about it until maybe 10 years ago. So that part is true. But as far as DDP being a member of the tribe, I don't believe that to be the case. Speaking of DDP, July 24th, 2001. In the midst of the DDP stalker angle with Undertaker, after his jump to the WWF, Danger3210 says, please don't have Sarah betray Undertaker and go with DDP. Please, whatever you do, don't go there. Ugh. I see dark days ahead. Well, that person was more accurate than they would have known. The person says, part of DDP's contract was that he had to swap wives with The Undertaker. That would have been an interesting clause in the contract. And your Olympic hero replies, in that case, it looks like Undertaker gets the better end of that deal. It's true, it's damn true. Ah, come on now. Your Olympic hero, that's awful. That's awful. Well, Kimberly was a very attractive woman. I would put Kimberly was just, you know, to a young teenage boy back then during the Monday Night War. Kimberly Page was somebody that you wanted to watch on TV. That's just how it was. If you were in high school at the time or college or whatever, Nitro Girls, right? That was the time. June 19th, 2001. Grady with the title Spoiler, Damn It. He sounds very upset, and we have had posts before that I have found from over the years back in the 90s of people getting very upset because results were being spoiled for them. Again, it's funny to look back at that because we still have people who bitch about that today, all these years, a couple of decades later. Of course, now all this information is a lot more easily accessible. But what do people expect when you go to a forum like RSPW? You don't want to be spoiled. Well, anyway, let's get into this here. It says, why in the name of freaking hell has there been so many posts with DDP in the headline giving away the whole plot? It says, for the last time, there are more than just Americans in this group. Use a spoiler tag, please. This person is not very happy at all. Clearly, they come from Belgium or some such place. Incubus says, maybe something like, spoiler, DDP is the stalker for the heading, or maybe I cannot comment on DDP as the stalker. Threadkiller says, you got to expect a spoiler. If you want to be surprised, don't visit RSPW until you see the show, just like the rec.sport.boxing news group. If I'm going to wait till the replay of a big pay-per-view, I won't visit the site, so quit bitching. That's from Threadkiller. Heel Jeff says, would you like a tissue to dry up those tears? And D-Chance says, once a show airs, it becomes fair game for commentary. There are some areas that get raw on a much longer delay. Should we do a poll to find out how long we have to wait before posting our opinions? And what about all those other news sites like Wrestling Observer, Torch, and One Wrestling? Should they also wait until everybody in the world has a chance to see the tape delay before they comment? You live in an area where you cannot get the show live? Tough! Get a damn satellite. In lieu of that, don't visit the news group or any other news site or web-based message board until you see the show. By the way, has your country aired the NBA Finals yet? Spoiler, the Lakers won in 5. Ah, you jerk. I was gonna watch that. Thanks a lot. I had the playoffs on tape. You just ruined my whole night. I had my whole night set up and now you ruined it for me. I'm just kidding. I don't have a VCR anymore to play, so I still can't watch it. July 3rd, 2001, newbie with a post titled WCW Invasion Angle, no backstory. Do you think the problem with this whole invasion angle is the lack of an introduction given to the WCW characters? The WWF writing team seems to think that WWF fans know and care about these WCW performers, when I would imagine the vast majority of WWF viewers do not know who Booker T is, who do not know who Buff Bagwell is, and other people are. K-Quick would probably get more heat in the main event in a WWF match. At least WWF fans know who the guy is. Incubus says this. The main problem is simple. Booker T and Buff Bagwell, granted, are well-known wrestlers, but without the real superstars from WCW like Goldberg, Sting, Flair, Steiner, etc., the angle will not be what, in all reality, we want it to be. Been saying that for how many years? They should have spent some money bringing some more big names at the beginning of that invasion angle. This person, that's the name that he uses, this person says, it's clear that the WWF brass have no fucking clue. They spend years of airtime, millions of dollars, careers of wrestlers, and Monday after Monday trying to convince fans not to watch Nitro. They watch WCW fold because of poor booking and misuse of resources that drove away a loyal fan base. They see Raw ratings after Nitro goes off the air get worse than they were during the Monday Night Wars. Yet they assume their fans are familiar with WCW. Joan, an actual female, or who knows. I've said it before, they need A-list talent. It's not that they don't know who they are. They aren't that stupid, just that they're not considered stars. I'm gonna guess that that's not Joan. It's probably Joan's son Timmy or something using Joan's account. There ain't no Joan on RSPW. I'm just gonna take a wild guess. Don Martin says, you've missed the point. The whole invasion angle centers on the McMonkey family disputes. It is immaterial which name wrestlers they've signed as long as it's made clear which one sides with Shane, or, I'm sorry, he calls him Shame, and which one sides with Vince. This angle is for the glorification of the McMonkeys, no more, no less. Big Mappa Pump and her favorite freak, Stephanie McMahon, writes, let me repeat that. This post is from a user named Big Mama Pump and her favorite freak, Stephanie McMahon. Try filling out forms with that name. Number 1. The WCW invasion angle is missing most of the serious stars. Hogan, Nash, Hall, Sting, Goldberg, Bret Hart, Scott Steiner, Randy Savage. They are missing the very people who would provide the backstory. Now, yes, I realize Hogan sucks wrestling-wise, but his inclusion in the angle provides a hell of a backstory built in, as would Bret Hart, as would Nash and Hall. Even if they don't wrestle much and never win titles, because these are all the people who could say they were screwed by Vince McMahon. And this is payback. Booker T, you might say this is retribution. Maybe they should dress up like a bunch of ninjas and they could take chainsaws to the ring. See, guys like Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan, they wouldn't work in the angle anyway, because they're not 4.5 feet tall. Anyway, let's see here, where'd I leave off? Booker T and Vince McMahon don't have a history, and Booker T has a history with nobody in the WWF. Neither do O'Haire and Jindrak. Nobody on that roster does, and that is why it is not working. Interestingly enough, Chronic, the wrestlers, Chronic does, and the Harris brothers do, but they are nowhere to be found. Number 2, the invasion angle is missing the one man who would character-wise make it work, and that is Eric Bischoff. Nothing Shane, nothing against Shane, but nobody thinks of Shane when they think of someone running WCW. They think of Bischoff. As a booker, he may have sucked raw eggs, but as a character, he was a great character on television. He was the man. Bischoff was also, frankly, their best announcer. Flair, if they could get him, might make an adequate replacement for Bischoff, unless WWF is holding back a major player or players for a big payoff on the Invasion pay-per-view. This thing is going to suck and run WCW into the ground. July 27, 2001, Pete Panaro with a post titled, Face It, RSPW, the invasion angle is done, even if it exists in name. Look at what we've gotten out of it. Rock versus Austin. Vince against his kids. Rob Van Dam is a new mid-carder to hype. DDP is enhancement talent for The Undertaker, his wife, and Kane, and the rest of the ECW, WCW wrestlers as fluff to freshen the roster up a little bit. You know, Pete makes a great point, which is that one of the problems, one of the many problems with the invasion angle was that, you know, a lot like with everything else, they had to make it about the McMahons. I mean, here we are now 20 plus years later, and everything is still about the McMahons. I'm recording this less than a week after we had the returns of Shane McMahon and Stephanie McMahon to television. Shane's hosting some kind of underground fight club on Raw. Stephanie's on the Tron because she won't be caught dead in the Performance Center. I don't blame her. That's always their fallback. When the numbers fall and the ratings start to go down, what do? You dust off the McMahon kids. And if they didn't have Shane and Stephanie, it would be Linda. And if it wasn't Linda, Vince would call his brother up and say, hey, Rod, we need you. And it'd be Rod McMahon on television. They have no faith in their own talent. They always rely on the McMahon name, and it was no different back then. Here we are all these years later, but back then it was no different. Back then they could get away with it because the McMahons actually drew TV ratings. They were still kind of interesting characters on TV. But think about it. You think about the invasion thing here, right? Now, I was jotting down some of the key feuds during the invasion, or during this whole period, right? But you go back to the Monday Night War and all that, it was Vince against Stone Cold, right? His top star who defected to WCW. That was like the biggest story of the invasion. The biggest WWF star defected to WCW. He wasn't a WCW star. But they didn't think it could work unless you put a WWF guy in there. And that was it. It failed. It was already a failure. Because that's not what people wanted to see. They wanted two different distinct groups that you build to like one big supercard. You build to some dream matches. You pit one side against the other. Once they started blending the sides and, you know, they only brought in like mid-card guys. They didn't bother trying to buy out the contracts of some of the bigger guys. This thing was never going to work. This thing was dead in the water. But everything was always so centered around the McMahons. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, I could tell you as somebody who was a fan during that era, right? As somebody who was a fan and watched all the television during that era, there was no fans who were dreaming of Stone Cold to go to WCW and then feud with Vince McMahon from the other side. Who thinks that's a good idea? Vince McMahon thought it was a good idea. And in the end, he had his hands raised, right? At Survivor Series. Even though he owned the friggin' company, he stood over its dead corpse like he actually won some kind of big battle. Meanwhile, you know how many millions of dollars they left on the table? It's not even my money, and it makes me angry. All the money they left on the table, they just flushed it down the toilet because of their own incompetence. And finally, let's get off this invasion side. It always drives up my blood pressure every time I think about that dumb invasion. And finally, August 4th, 2001, Devon with the post title, or Devon. Every time I say the word Devon, I automatically think Devon. Devon with the post titled, Why Does Undertaker Get Bashed So Much, but Kane Does Not? Let's look at the stats. And first he looks at Undertaker. Past his prime in the ring, but still works hard. Past his prime in the ring. This was 2001. And Devon says he was past his prime. Has strong knowledge of ring psychology, no sells too much, slowed by age, has lost some agility because of injuries, rarely jobs, and does not job cleanly to anybody not named Steve Austin. Now we get to Kane. Was never good in the ring and does not work hard, which is just complete bullshit. You just already lost the argument there. Blows more spots than he hits, never sells to anyone ever, slow, clumsy, uncoordinated, and cannot use age as an excuse, has trouble walking fast, delivers the ugliest flying clothesline of all time, and cannot use injuries as an excuse. He rarely jobs, does not job cleanly to anybody outside of no DQ matches in which his opponent hits him with a foreign object a lot and/or gets help from other wrestlers. Based on all of these facts, The Undertaker is bashed repeatedly by internet fans, including most of RSPW, while Kane is never bashed. And is even heralded by some as the best big man in wrestling. Why the inconsistency? Everything The Undertaker does that's bad, Kane does worse. At least The Undertaker used to be great. Kane has never been any good. If internet fans had any consistency at all, they would be bashing Kane worse than they do Undertaker. Instead, internet fans and many people in RSPW are a bunch of hypocrites. I get the sense here that Devin is not a Kane fan. Just a hunch. NC Bran SC says Kane is a pretty good worker by big man standards, and Undertaker used to be. President Ric Flair was very upset by this criticism of Kane. Says, you say Kane was never good in the ring and doesn't work hard. What? You say he's slow and clumsy and uncoordinated and cannot use age as an excuse. He's 7 feet tall and over 300 pounds. You say he has trouble walking fast, delivers the ugliest flying clothesline of all time, and cannot use injuries as an excuse. He's 7 feet tall and 300 plus pounds. You say he rarely jobs and does not job cleanly to anybody outside of no DQ matches, in which his opponent hits him with a foreign object or gets help from other wrestlers. He's jobbed to X-Pac twice. What more do you want? Griffin801 says, what we want is for Kane to show some wrestling ability in the ring. In these days of sports entertainment, one tends to forget that wrestling is not about Perry Saturn's love affair with a mop or Stephanie McMahon's enlarged breasts, but it's about wrestling. Devin responds, what you said makes sense, but it doesn't explain why some people refer to Kane as the best big man in wrestling. What on earth has Kane ever done to make people think that? In fact, I would go as far as to say that Kane does less with his size than any other big man in the business. If you don't bash Kane because you expect him to suck, that's fine, but don't call him the best big man in wrestling. And Stephen Morlock, in response to somebody who, I guess, complimented Kane by saying he was the largest man he's ever seen who is able to do a competent Hurricane Rana or Enziguri. And another person replied and said, define competent. I've seen his Hurricane Rana and Enziguri and they look like shit. Give me Undertaker's aerial moves any day of the week. Steven responds, Jesus fucking Christ. He is 7 feet tall and 300 plus pounds. And you're saying that his Hurricane Rana looks like shit. He's fucking 7 feet tall. I've never seen Undertaker bust out a Rana. Kane can also do a pescado. Can the Undertaker? And speaking of Undertaker's aerial moveset, what aerial moves? The plancha he busts out once every 2 years? The rope walking bullshit that could easily be done by Viscera? Now that I'd like to see. You have absolutely zero grounds here. Kane is a 100 times better high flyer than The Undertaker. I gotta side with Steven on this one. I mean, imagine the kind of prick you have to be to criticize a 7 foot tall, 300 plus pound man for not being able to do a good Hurricane Rana. I, for one, cannot wait to see Baron Corbin bust out his 630 on SmackDown next week. So until next time, this has been your weekly reminder that even as times change, wrestling fans, well, they never do.